the Albina Ministerial Alliance, a coalition for justice and police reform, community dialogue on police accountability. We will be here from noon till 3 this afternoon to hear directly from community members about their experiences with Portland Police. It is my pleasure to introduce to you now the chair of the Albina Ministerial Alliance, Coalition for Justice and Police Reform Chair, Dr. Leroy Haynes. Please put your hands together and welcome.
We want to first thank each of you for coming out today and to be a part of this listening process. We believe that this is a critical and pivotal time, that we are in the process of transforming the Portland Police Bureau, and that has urgently come to the issues of police accountability and the abuse of excessive force and the use of deadly force. We believe that we can develop a community policing program that will be beneficial to all of the citizens of Portland. What we have found out historically, that we have within our city a them against us context that in terms where excessive force is used on those that are mentally ill, those that are persons of color within our community, those that are trying to exercise their constitutional rights. And we want to say very clearly that there are officers that do an outstanding and professional job, but there are also bad apples within the Portland Police Bureau that we need to identify, and we need to hold them accountable for their action. One of the critical things that I have seen as a leader in the civil rights movement since the age of 13, as the youth organizer of the Southern Christian Conference in the state of Texas, I discovered that, and Frederick Douglass was correct when he said that if there is no demand for justice, nothing will happen. If the people that are the victims of injustice, are the victims of oppression, they do not demand justice. Frederick Douglass says, like the farmers who want crops without tilling the soil, and who want crops without the thundering and lightning. Power conceives nothing without a demand. And the reason that we were successful in the civil rights movement and the post-civil rights movement is because we demanded a change, a transformation within our society. And we were willing to use petitions and demonstrations, court cases, sit-ins, whatever was necessary to forge the envelope to create a better society and a better America. With this particular issue that is not unique to Portland itself, but in every urban city across America, the city of police violence, every citizen expects that they should be able to call their police department and get fair and professional and justifiable service, because the police is supposed to represent, in terms of the legal entity of the community, to serve the community. But when you have mistrust, that has developed over the historical period of time, where police and the civil rights movement were used to stop African Americans from gaining their civil rights and their civil liberties, that police have been used in terms historically to destroy unions and to prevent unions from organizing. And so what we have as a context is that these entities can be used to carry out the established order of command that will not always represent the community. And so we challenge that. We challenge that and say that we will not accept injustice. We will not accept excessive use of force. We will not accept the unjustifiable deadly force from our police department. And we challenge that on the basis of the citizens like you organizing and coming together and petitioning and demonstrating and using those available means to call attention to the issue of excessive force and deadly force within our community. And so it is all of this that we emerge as the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform. It emerged out of a struggle. It emerged out of the cries of the mothers and the parents in our community that have lost their children and lost their sons and daughters and lost their husbands and their wives, their brothers and their sisters through the action of certain individual officers within the Portland Police Bureau. And we believe that we can do better. Turn to your neighbor and say, we can do better. Oh, you can be that organist. Say, we can do better. Amen. We can do better. We can have a better police department. We can have a better community policing that take place in our community. And this is what the AMA Coalition is all about. But it takes action. It takes commitment. It takes in terms along ourselves to move towards knocking on the door for justice and expecting nothing less than justice to take place, that to stop the killing, stop the use of exercise excessive force within the Bureau itself, and to correct and make a department that we can all be about, that can say that this community policing, that the Portland Police Bureau belong to us. And so we want to thank you once again for coming out, and want to say that this is the beginning, and we have Dr. Bethel will come next, our co-chair of the AMA Coalition, and talk in particular about the policies and practices of the audit of the U.S. Justice Department.
Thank you, Dr. Haynes. Boy, I like this stool right here. Hey, all right. Well, the audit patterns and practices of the Portland Police Bureau came about as a request from the Albina Ministerial Alliance and the Coalition for Police Accountability and Reform. What is an audit? Audit looks at what has been. And if you take it from a financial perspective, it then tells you how that performance has been, what the policies are, and if there are things that need to be done. In an audit, you get notes. And those notes really count when entities look at you. So the Portland Police Bureau, we believe, have policies, but their practices don't equate to what the policies say. So therefore, if we have a policy that says you can only put 3 chairs in a row, but in practice, we put 2 or we put 5, we can't come back and say the policy says we can only do 3. Yes, but your practice is something different. The policy says if my life is in danger or the danger of others is present, then I am authorized to use deadly force. But if I use deadly force, and the question is asked, did you feel that your life was in danger? Yes, my life was in danger. I'm justified. Is that really justified? So, we have case after case that you may see flashing on the PowerPoint screen, where individuals have lost their lives under different circumstances. Young lady, they tried to pull her out of the car by her hair. The officer says, I'm in the car. I'm halfway in, I'm halfway out. I know where she lives, but her life is gone. Well, he had a 6-inch knife. It was an X-Acto knife, people, that has less than a 1/2-inch blade. But I feared for my life. Well, the officer, you follow that story, decided to go take up that case. Made sure he secured everyone. Approached the man locked in the bathroom, backed himself into a corner. The end result is a death. So we ask, in spite of what you've heard the city say, that they ask for and welcome, they may have welcomed them after it was asked for an audit of patterns and practices of the Bureau. But the record will clearly state that in the end of January, 1st of February, about 2010, I think I have the year right, when Aaron Campbell was shot, we all gathered at the Northeast Precinct, and we agreed with all of our legislative body from Washington, D.C., local, and our mayor, that we wanted a civil rights investigation in the death of Aaron Campbell. Then Police Commissioner Dan Salzman stated, but we feel that there will be nothing found out of order. It was after that that I stepped to the podium and said, we're asking for more than that. We're asking for an audit of patterns and practices by the Department of Justice. If the news kept the film, it's on the film. We know what happened. We're not giving up this fight. This is not a sprint, it is a marathon. So we're asking, it is under investigation, others are happening, but I also want you to know that audits only began to come back into force again with the beginning of the Obama administration. It is my understanding that during the Bush years, no audits were done of any departments. But in this Obama administration, we have seen New Orleans, Cincinnati, Newark, New Jersey, and just with about a month ago, completed Seattle, Washington. And there are others underway. And in each of those thus far, there have been found things that need to be corrected. I feel it's going to be the same when we get through here with Portland. If it is not, Portland will be on the national news because the city is already sitting on a powder keg. It will blow up. It will explode. Now, news media who's writing, who's blogging, please blog and report my statement in its context and not a soundbite to make it appear that Dr. Bethel threatened the city. And I'm so glad that this is on tape, because if you blog it, report it a different way, I'm going to call you to the press and I'm going to put you with the tape and you will justify what you say. That's not a threat. That's a PROMISE. That's known as a promise. Because we no longer want to be misquoted. We don't want to be quoted out of context. We want to be quoted within what we say so that it is reported and recorded and received in the right way. I give myself an amen. Now, with all of that said, the pardons, and Joanne Hardesty is going to come back, who is a great leader, and she will give us further instructions about what is going to happen for the day. I thank you for coming. I thank you for your support. We need you. We're going to join our hands together. We're not giving up. We have not crossed the finish line yet. The winds are blowing. The weather is changing. But until we cross that finish line, we're going to keep on running.
I also want to take a moment and thank Joe Anybody for taping for us. We're going to now invite Social Justice Minister Kate Lowe to the podium so that she can tell you a bit more about the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition.
Thank you, Joanne. I thought you might want to know what it is specifically that we're working for. So let me just tell you that this coalition, we came together in 2003 originally with the death of Kendra James, and then we got reorganized with the death of Aaron Campbell. Our coalition is made up of 25 faith-based and community organizations, and we're working towards these 5 goals. 1, a federal investigation by the Justice Department to include criminal and civil rights violations, as well as a federal audit of patterns and practices of the Portland Police Bureau. And you now are part of that history, right? Because this is the audit that's going on right now, and why your testimony today is so valuable. 2nd, strengthening the Independent Police Review Division and the Citizen Review Committee with the goal of adding power to compel testimony. Now, this is something that we have made some progress on, but there are more, certainly more things that need to be done before we can cross that one off the list. Let's see. Come on. There we go. The 3rd one. We'd like a full review of the Bureau's excessive force and deadly force policies and trainings with diverse citizen participation for the purpose of making recommendations that change policies and training. This is certainly incomplete, but we are making progress. And 4. The Oregon State Legislature, we wanted to narrow the language of the state statute for deadly force used by police officers. We feel like that excuse that our life felt in danger, so we have the right to kill this person, is a disaster for our community, and we'd like that changed. And lastly, we are working for the establishment of a special prosecutor for police excessive force and deadly force cases. This is, again, a progress and work, but we have a long ways to go. Now, that's what we want to do. I also want to share with you how we want to do it. We gather together around 3 important principles. First, we come back to those 5 goals. We don't get distracted. We don't get diffused. We come back to all 5 goals until they're all met. We accept the principles of nonviolent direct action, as enunciated by Dr. King, and we work as a team in concert to achieve these goals. So, that's who we are. And we welcome more organizations into this coalition. Just let us know. Thank you so much.
Coalitions are only as strong as the individuals that make up that coalition, And we are blessed in this community to have the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition. We have some strong, strong community leaders that have continued to keep this issue in the forefront of our community. So I just want to take a moment and just acknowledge the incredible work that's being done for free by people that have a couple of other things on their plate, but they do it because this is important. So thank you very much. At this time, I'm going to invite my media expert to come back and rechange the slides so that we continue to see the history of the community members' experiences here in Portland with our police department. We have a broken system because it is inconceivable that we can continue to have unarmed people killed at the hands of our police and then be told it's within policy. If that is the case, we have the wrong policy, and we need to work together to figure out what the policy changes are that are absolutely necessary. At this time, I invited a couple of people to give some very specific testimony. You may have seen on the slide earlier, or just be very aware that in 2010, we talked about the death of Aaron Campbell, but there was another young African-American man that died in 2010, and his name was Keaton Otis. And this was a young man that died within 45 seconds of a traffic stop. And the reason that he was even pulled over was because he looked like he could possibly be a gang member by two officers who were ill-equipped to be able to identify what a gang member looks like. And so there are some questions that the community continues to have around Keaton Otis' death, and I invited his father, Fred Bryant, to come and ask some of those questions on the record today. This is hard for Mr. Bryant to do. He's here because he knows that this is a community that is embracing him and is supporting him as he seeks justice for his son. And so I'm going to walk around and put my hand on Mr. Bryant's shoulder as he puts these questions on the record. So give me just a second. While Mr. Bryant is getting ready, as soon as he's done, I'm going to ask if there's anyone here representing the Mental Health Association, because we invited them to come and participate in this forum, because we know that the people that are most endangered in our community are people who are African American, people with mental health issues, and poor people in our community. And so we want to make sure that those people have an opportunity to help create the record. While I'm waiting for Mr. Bryant, does anyone have any questions about the coalition or how they can get connected to the coalition? Is there anyone here from the U.S. Department of Justice?
So let me state that they went to Terrell Auditorium. They called me while I was speaking. I went out and called them. They're trying to regroup to see if they can get back. They left the campus. They were here.
Oh.
They just went to the wrong building and thought that since they didn't see anybody, we would not meet. They should have known better.
They should have known better. Mr. Bryant, please come forward. Or at least we know that they're interested in what we have to say today. Didn't say anything about
their powers of investigating.
that. Amen. Now please put your hands together for Mr. Bryant, because this is one of the hardest things I know that he's going to do this weekend. But he agreed to be here because it's important that as a community, we understand the questions that are still left unanswered. You ready, partner? We can do this.
Hello, and thank you
for coming out and supporting. There are 5 questions here that I have. And, on that day, who shot Officer Chris Burley? I've been told the bullet disintegrated so that we cannot tell whether he shot himself. Blood splatters on his shirt suggest that the officer was bending over when he was shot. He would have been out of Keaton's line of sight. So that's one of the questions. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead. Listening to the number of rounds that day fired, the police fired more than can be held in 2 ammunition clips. Why do they insist that only 2 officers shot their weapons? So who was the 3rd shooter? The videotape appears to support that Keaton's hands are up before the first taser is deployed. Why did the police stop investigating Officer Burley for shooting my son? Watching the unedited video and reading testimony about Otis with his hands raised, angry by being pulled over, you realize he never had time to reach for a gun, let alone pull it from a cloth bag in the glove compartment. In the unedited video I have, you never heard police caution one another by shouting, "Gun." Did the police drop this gun after Keaton was killed? Where's the gun they said that my son had, and where did it come from? Based on testimony of 2 officers who decided to pull my son over that day, he was suspicious because he would not make eye contact with the officers and he was wearing a hoodie. My son and others have a constitutional right to
Give him a hand, please. Thank Mr. Bryant. The last question that Mr. Bryant was trying to read is, why did they stop my son in the first place? Why did my son die within 45 seconds of that stop? Based on the testimony of the 2 officers who decided to pull Keaton over that day, Keaton was suspicious because he would not make eye contact with the officers, and he was wearing a hoodie. My son and others have a constitutional right to dress any way they want without fear of death at the hands of police officers. My son and others need justice. Please work with us to ensure that no other parent loses a son in this manner. Thank you. We really, really, really appreciate your family being here today. Is anyone here from the Mental Health Association that wanted to speak on behalf of them? And so the process that we are going to use, when you came in, you signed up, we asked you to check a box, a check next to your name if you wanted to provide public testimony. We will have a mic here and a mic on this end, and we will start that process now. We also have pen and paper for people who would prefer not to speak but have questions that they would like to try to get answered today. And after we receive public testimony, we will share with you what the next steps are. And so the next steps with the information we gathered today, and the next step as we move forward with police accountability. And so, on that note, if you would be kind enough to grab the sign-in sheets off the table outside and bring them up, that would be helpful. The gentleman that's not actually, would you be so kind, Ken, as to grab those sign-in sheets for me? And by a show of hands, can I see who would like to testify? Okay, I see a couple of hands. I also want to make sure that people know that we are videotaping, so if you don't want to be on camera, please let us know, and we will respect your wish. And we will pass out cards and pens if people want to write down questions.
Let me know if you want a card, and also if you don't want to be on camera today, you can testify directly to the Department of Justice at their website or by phone. Anybody want a card?
Thank you so much.
Take a card.
It's okay. It's okay. So we have Michelle from Occupy. Michelle? Hi, Michelle. How are you?
You might want to
Stand up there.
stand here.
This isn't a major event probably, but recently I've seen red marks on Occupy people, and I heard many reports of police brutality, and I saw the ambulance stand by and avoid running into help. It just goes on and on. I will do it in more detail, maybe directly to the Department of Justice when I get my notes better together. I've seen a lot of police brutality in the last couple months. It's not helping my PTSD at all. It's been a weekly occurrence of the bruised witnessing of my friends and seeing police brutality at first hand on the front lines of our Occupy stuff. About 6 or 7 incidents of police brutality I've seen in the last month, 2 months. Weak incidents compared with other people's sufferings, but yet it tells me what's the pattern and the behavior of the people.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Marcia, are you ready? Or somebody else? Come on up, Marcia.
Why not?
You're so good at this.
Well, I wasn't sure I would speak. I did run off, and I have about 25 copies of basically what happened to my daughter 4 years ago this coming April, so it's going on 4 years. And what I want to talk about here is the pattern, as you just said. And I feel very fortunate. I was thinking that my daughter wasn't killed. And that's way over. I was on the bell-shaped curve. And when I was thinking about that, I was thinking of the arc of justice that Martin Luther King talked about. But it is a bell-shaped curve of power and control and intimidation where people are killed at the far end. My daughter was abused almost 4 years ago because she didn't have a ticket on the MAX. The machine was broken, and that has been investigated, and yes, indeed it was. She decided to get on anyway and to pay whoever came on, if anyone did ask her. When the 2 police officers got on, she is an acutely sensitive, emotionally sensitive person, and when she was asked for her ticket, she explained that the machine was broken and held out her money to them, which was her plan. She was then asked to get off the MAX by one of the officers, and when she asked why, she felt And I want to say this because this happens to all of us. We do feel things. And she saw that this officer was enraged. She asked why. Her response was to run, fight or flight. She was chased, thrown to the ground, and had her head smashed. Now, if she'd been an African American, it could have been worse, I think, and especially a young African American male. But these officers did pursue her. She had her head cut. She was taken to the hospital, and then she was arrested. She had 3, charges, against her. The crux of this is that the officer that she felt this rage coming from was Chris Humphreys. This was 2 years after the chassis incident. It was about 3 months before this community, bless our hearts, and I'm sure you had a lot to do with it. It was before I got real involved with Albina Ministerial Alliance, petitioned the police force here to say something about the chassis incident. Almost 2 years later, some of you remember that petition. For 2 years. And I'm saying this because Chris Humphreys is also a victim of this. He was out there, and he'd already had another incident that you and I as taxpayers paid a great deal of money for when he pounded on somebody that wasn't the person that was involved. So he already had this pattern. And so I want to point out that my daughter was not only victimized, but Chris Humphreys was victimized. And this whole community is by this power and control model that we are changing. My daughter then, on her own, went up against the system, and for 2 years, she was in court 22 times saying, I am not a criminal. If there was any criminal activity, it was on the part of the police. Because it was Chris Humphreys, they didn't just dismiss it. They finally did almost 2 years later. I'm really going on, I'm being a bad model, but I want to point out that these things affect us all. And my daughter did end up having to be hospitalized, or they thought she did, for emotional problems after 2 years of going up against the criminal justice system and having it dismissed a week before she wanted to go to trial. But they dismissed it. As her court-ordered attorney said, they were playing chicken with her. And most people, I'm very proud of her, her name's Lisa Ann Kopic, she had the willpower, and I was behind her all the way to stand up. But most people don't have that kind of support because they're so confused and intimidated by this system. So as a teacher, I want to say I want our police to be the peacekeepers, the people we can depend on, that we teach our children, officer-friendly. Thank you so much, and I'm sorry if I went on, but it really is something that's intimidating us all.
Thank you so much. No, you're absolutely right. What we have found is that complaints against police brutality are down in the city of Portland. And so it would lead some of us to believe that we don't have a problem. The reality, however, is that complaints are down because community members have no confidence that if they file a complaint, it will be investigated and solved in a way that is justice for the community. And so that's the reality. It's like, yes, the complaints are down, but it's not because anything good is coming out of that process. Could you pass me that signing sheet back, please? The next person who signed up is Glenn. And I'm going to ask people to try to be succinct because we want to hear from as many people as possible. And we didn't put a 2 or 3 minute limit on it because we're not the city council. We actually want to hear from community members.
Well, thank you so much for this investigation. I guess I'm one of those individuals who has had a few too many encounters with law enforcement in my life. While it's nothing I'm proud of, I feel like I'm in a bit of a unique position to see the differences in arrest tactics. If I have time, I would like to briefly touch on 3 instances that stand out most in my mind. Driving one night in the summer of 2007 to get dinner from my house in what other officers referred to as Felony Flats Southeast, I got pulled over. The officer told me I had no tail lights, license plate lights, nothing. I gave him my paperwork, he ran it and returned it and told me to be on my way. I asked him if he would follow me down to the auto zone so I don't get rear-ended. He told me my lights were fine and to be on my way. He started returning to his cruiser. I got out of my truck to ask his badge number. The officer put his left hand out and used his right hand to unsnap his sidearm. He promptly told me to leave immediately. I did, never being allowed to get his name or badge number. 2, in March of 2009, I was arrested without incident and was in booking. I mistakenly admitted that I was a bit suicidal at the time. 4 officers escorted me to a holding cell where they instructed me to strip naked. I got down to my boxers before I bothered to ask any further questions. Correctional Officer Pate then told me that they were out of suicide smocks and I would be sitting naked until they could finish processing me. I told them that this was unacceptable, illegal, and tantamount to torture. At which point, all 4 correctional officers entered the cell. I tried to non-violently hold my ground, but realized it was useless. I stripped the boxers and tossed them at Officer Pate's feet. Quickly, all 4 officers swarmed me, slammed my face against the wall, broke my glasses, and lifted me off the ground by the elbow twisted behind my back, tearing my rotator cuff. Then, as they said, I sat curled in a ball naked in that freezing room until, I think, shift change, when a female officer angrily asked me why I wasn't wearing my smock and got me one. I did 50 days in the hole for assault on staff before they let me talk to a mental health professional. 3rd, I would like to speak to some of the brutality I have seen and experienced in the last 3 weeks, namely one march on January 25th, 2012. I would like to speak about my brother Marcavius, a retired Special Forces member who was swarmed by 6 officers and taken to the ground for jaywalking. My brother Sean, who had his iPhone slapped from his hand, stomped by Officer Colbert. When the 15-year-old tried to confront Officer Colbert, Sean was punched 3 times in the left eye. My brother Mario, who was pulled out of a crowd by an officer who sliced in on horseback and was tackled, incapacitated, choked, and then an officer twisted his right arm into the air while another kneed him repeatedly in the ribs. When I got knocked off the curb that night, I was slammed to the ground, jumped on, lost the ability to breathe, and was also kneed repeatedly in the ribs. These are just a few of my first-hand and eyewitness accounts of Portland Police Bureau's tactics. Thank you for doing this investigation.
Thank you so much. Calvin, you're next. You gonna pass? Okay. Cameron, are you signed up? You didn't check. I'm sure you have something to say.
Okay, I'm next.
You can be. I have that power.
Hi, my name is Cameron. I've only been, this is really loud for me. I've only been recently a victim to police accountability. Yeah, hello? Is that good?
That's better, yes.
Yeah, I've only been recently a victim to police brutality, and I've been very, vocal about my recent assault and harassment that I've been experiencing. And I've been further galvanized by the fact that this is historic and systemic oppression that's been, intentionally happened to many people in Portland, especially people who are of color and are of mental health crisis, as Joanna said before. And I was really, really outraged because a few weeks ago, there was another shooting of Bradley Lee Morgan. And it shows how all you need to do is have a phone call, and the police will be there to give you a death sentence. So I just want to remind everybody that the justice is in our hands, how it is going to take us to change things. I know that I'm going to use all of my power to make sure that we can go over the institutional oppression that we have here, because these institutions, they don't want to change. They like the status quo. So we are going to have to go out, we're going to sign petitions, we're going to have to put our justice on the ballot, and we're going to have to take back control, of our Justice Department, of our police union, and of our government. So please join me with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Cameron. I want to take a moment and introduce Billy Williams. Billy, would you stand up, please? He's with the U.S. Department of Justice. And Amanda Marshall was here earlier, but she went to the wrong location, so we're hopeful that she's making her way back to here.
I'm waiting to hear.
Billy's waiting to hear, so we have high hopes. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. And Dr. Bethel, we know that you have to go to another meeting. Thank you so much for all you've done to make sure this issue is addressed. And so next we have Jordan. Jordan? Hi, Jordan. It's probably better if you come down and stand kind of in this area so that Joe doesn't have to actually move the camera. Thank you.
So first I have to say, sorry if I ramble or my words aren't making too much sense. A little anxious right now, hearing a lot of this stuff and witnessing a lot of the things I've witnessed just in the past few months gets me a little riled up. The last time I was arrested for an Occupy event, I had a police officer point at me and say, "She has been arrested for Occupy." And I was snatched out of the crowd and brought back, thrown to the ground, and dragged to the caddy wagon after zip tie. But there was, what happened to my friend later that night inside of the jail is what really broke my heart. I'm not going to say her name, but this friend has a mental history where she can't be left alone, and where she suffers from manic bipolar disorder and can really, really get herself worked up and possibly hurt herself if she's put in an unsafe mental situation. We tried to warn the police officers about this because she also had been arrested previously for Occupy, and we were both booked that night. Well, about 20 other people were let go because they were not arrested previously for Occupy. My friend ended up spending, I believe, a little over 8 hours in solitary confinement that night. We tried to warn the police officers, and they looked at us and they said that they did not care. A few nights ago, during an anti-police brutality march, also a solidarity march with Oakland, I watched a young man, probably in his early 20s, stand on the side of the road. Not in the road, not on the sidewalk, but on the side of the road. And he opened his arms, and I watched a police officer throw his bike down and have that police officer and 3 others jump on top of this man. They then went and tried to break his arm for 3 minutes. I want to point out that a group of police officers watched people that were dressed in all black attack public property. They watched that happen. But that night, none of those people were arrested, none of those people were caught, and only occupiers were thrown to the ground and arrested. We tried to cross the road when we had every legal right. I had a megaphone, and I pointed out to the riot cops, "We are waiting for the walk symbol. We waited for that walk symbol. Once it turned to walk, we had 5 riot cops come over to that side of the sidewalk. We began to try to cross the street. Next thing you know, my friend gets pushed with a baton back into me. The megaphone hits me, and now I have a bloody nose. We also had to run from police that night and also get kenneled. Corral. Thank you. Thank you. Like I said, my words might not match up. But it was reported in the news at one point after the riot cops in the speaker box chased us away that the police officer speaking over the speakers laughed and said, "Take that, baby." I think it's a little sick that the police in this city are getting a kick out of attacking people and treating us like animals. There's many other stories I've seen, but I'm going to pass the mic on.
Thank you so much. We certainly appreciate you sharing those stories. So Kelvin, come on down. And for others who didn't sign up, if you put your hand up, I'll send you the sign-in sheet back. And if you want to testify, just put a check mark next to your name. Kelvin, you have a PowerPoint presentation you're going to make, or should I be worried?
Well, I wanted to have my words of expression on paper, so I'm not viewed as an angry black man.
Very good. All right. So Kelvin, why don't you move down this way a bit so that we can make sure that we get you on tape.
I make that joke in light of the perception of African American men and non-minorities who stand up for justice.
Moved it up.
I make that comment in light of the perception of African American men who stand up for justice and non-minorities who dare to stand with folks who stand up for their basic fundamental constitutional rights. I think it's an issue of perception, and that's why I put some words down to reflect my position. I have a degree in criminal justice, and I've spent over 15 years fighting for families in the city of Portland. But since these issues are emotional, and I've been on the front line fighting out of respect for the folks here and out of respect for the U.S. Attorney General here, I thought that I would put my words in writing so that it's succinct and it's clear. So no PowerPoint.
All right.
My name is Kelvin Hall. I'm a father, a husband, and a civil rights activist. I have 3 kids. My youngest is 2 months. I've lived in Oregon for over 40 years. I hold a Bachelor's of Science degree in Administration of Justice from Portland State University, and I'm currently undertaking a goal to complete a master's degree in public administration, which will lead to a PhD in public policy in the Hatfield of Government in 2014. I ran for public office in Multnomah County, located in the city of Portland, in 1998, receiving over 1,000 votes. I've served as a political and policy advisor to a number of grassroots candidates, most recently City Commissioner Amanda Fritz. I've served as a community organizer and advocate for more than 15 years on a number of the city of Portland's biggest civil rights cases, most notably Kendra James, the young lady who was shot by the police a number of years ago. And I've served on a number of other notable cases that involve serving as direct advocacy for folks whose civil rights and civil liberties have been violated. My words will be divided into 3 perspectives. My words will be divided into 3 perspectives. First, as a citizen. Second, as a black man. Third, a short analysis of the system, problem, and solution. The effort that you all have undertaken have been characterized by those who see no problem in the past practices and current conditions as a vaudeville circus show. Their manufactured conclusion suggests that, like a circus, the tent and all that comes with it will soon be packed up and move on for the next city seeking a political theater stage. Those manufactured words and perspectives are not finding of facts, but a tool used to attack character and perception of people who seek to make things better for all involved. I liken those inaccuracies to the congressman that called our president a liar during a speech to the nation, or the attorney generals who have filed briefs in the Supreme Court to challenge our president's health care policy. The opinions of these folks create a false narrative and perception that neither represents the truth nor the carefully studied that would yield policy prescriptions that represents a shared community. It would not matter if they had no positions of power or influence. However, that's not the case, and their influence has great ripple effects on other systems that feed into their intelligence reports. A false narrative leads to a false process, which leads to a false outcome, which leads to public distrust of systems that are charged to regulate bureaucracies. I offer a different narrative, not controlled by the frozen chosens, a metaphor that suggests when you are told, you do as you are told, regardless of the facts or the truth. Your efforts, as I see it, represents a historic time in our state to address and bring to light things that, thank you. I offer a different narrative, not controlled by the frozen chosens, a metaphor that suggests when you are told, you do as you are told, regardless of the facts or truth. Your efforts, as I see it, represents a historic time in our state to address and bring to light things that will impact future generations and create trust with all communities. Citizen. The Founding Fathers wrote the document called the Constitution. While they debated the merits and structure and agreed to core principles, the right to liberty, life, and the pursuit of happiness are hallmarks of work done centuries ago. The noted historian John Franklin stated that the election process was created to keep a balance of power. He also noted that the Founding Fathers copied the election process from the ancient Romans, who counted 100 people and gave them one vote to ensure parity of democracy. However, Dr. Franklin also pointed out that while the Founding Fathers created the Constitution, they had slaves. And while the ancient Romans had a process to ensure equal votes, they did not include women in that process.
Excuse me, Calvin, I'm going to ask you, how much longer is that going to be?
2 minutes.
Okay. I think we can we give 2 more minutes to hear the end of this? Because your lots of support.
The point being, all systems need independent oversight and auditing. History represents what happens when self-interest dominates regulatory practices without regard to basic guarantees. In conclusion, I've served, when a young lady, Kendra James, was shot, her father contacted me. He said that he had contacted a number of other folks and that they were feared of retaliation. And I worked as an advocate and I referred the case along with the father to the pastors and community organizations such as yours who did an outstanding job. And so my point is that my hat goes off to the community organizations that stand up for justice, and my hat goes off to the advocates who stand up for their democratic principles. The suggestion that I would simply make to the federal administrator is that community organizations and folks who stand up for justice do not hate police officers. We see them in high regards. They keep our cities safe and they make sure that we don't suffer from tyranny. However, the system is broken. And I have a slightly different perspective. I believe that the issue comes to investigations. I believe that the issue is about discovery, information, and facts. And I suggest that there should be a dialogue in reference to creating an inspector general. An inspector general where that citizens can file their complaint. And I believe that the broker deal for the inspector general should be that the discipline will be handled by the rest of the system, but that the Inspector General should have the authority to subpoena the facts. And that is a critical piece to ensure an appropriate relationship with this dealing with this issue. And the reason that I suggest that, is because of this final point. At the end of the day, the issue is about investigations. We want not manufactured conclusions, but we want finding of facts. The second suggestion I would make is for the State Department to remove the Civil Rights Department and put it underneath the Inspector General. Because when you're participating on the web of mutuality of investigations and you don't stand up and represent a call to arms when there's a question in terms of civil rights or civil liberties violation, how can you be called to serve as an independent and impartial judge to ensure that folks' findings or facts are just what they are? So thank you very much for your time and the extra moment.
Thank you very much, Calvin. I think Calvin has raised some really important issues, especially when you talk about how you hold police accountable for their behavior. And if you've been following the slideshow, you know that in our history, it has not happened often. In fact, right now, the city of Portland has paid over $400,000 on Officer Freshauer's case to get him reinstated to the Portland Police Bureau. And in our history, no one who's ever gone through arbitration has not gotten their job back. And so we're waiting for the day that that man puts on a uniform and is once again a City of Portland police officer. That's a flaw in our system. So Woody, you want to go next?
Good afternoon, everybody. Looking at the schedule events of the current events, I want to go back to when the gangs came to Portland. At that time, I was working with Inside Outside People, which is a community group to end recidivism. I was parked down at the bottom of Fremont. Officers were recruited from Los Angeles to come to Portland and to handle the gang situation, and it did not discriminate in terms of you could be 100 years old as long as you were black. You met the criteria to be beaten and to be maligned by these particular officers. I happened to encounter them. Now, I try to be respectful in every way. I got out and complied to all the demands of the officer. Actually, I was the first Rodney King before Rodney King. I was beaten so badly that in order to get relief from these officers, and I had to climb up under my car to stop them from beating me. While I was up under the car, one of them screamed, "He's got a gun, he's got a gun." And I'm thinking to myself, uh-oh, we done reached another epic here. I could die today. And so I said, "No, I don't have a gun," from up under the car. They grabbed me by my legs, pulled me out, and continued to beat me. After they beat me so badly and severely that they put me in the police car, then they took me down up under the Fremont Bridge, pulled over, stopped and looked at me and said, "We really kicked your ass, didn't we? Ha, ha, ha." They took this as a big joke, and I'm sitting in the back seat and I say, well, there must be some remedies. So instead of they took me to jail, then they released me to the hospital, didn't charge me. Then I went and contacted an attorney and the FBI. I filed this with the FBI, and what they came back with was they were going to proceed in terms of investigation. I went and got an attorney. The attorney was representing me real well. So at some point, when we were going to have the initial hearing, all of a sudden, he lost the paperwork. He didn't know where we were at. And I was lost in a situation where either I file now, I can't file later from what I understand, but I did take it to the point, as he suggested, sue me, don't sue them. So I sued my attorney. And that was unfortunate because from that particular incident of the gangs coming to Portland, this is the results. This is what we see. It's okay. You know, and now that we've all come to the point of being at 99%, we are all either black or wanting to be black, or in some way available to get your butt whooped. You know, that's the situation that's occurring here in Portland. This is the mindset. And it began from that day when the gangs came to Portland and there was no response. We don't know how to deal with these people. So we're gonna go get Rampart. We'll bring Rampart up here and they'll handle it. And I was the #1 recipient, like I said, the Rodney King butt whooping of Portland of the year. And I'm gonna continue to pursue that. And so now I'm gonna get back with the attorney that dropped me and get the information of those officers, because the officers were complicit not only with me, but with others, because I was called by an attorney to come and testify in the same incident. And when the officers saw me walk into the courtroom, they dismissed the case. That's what we're up against.
Thank you so much. So Dave, you're next.
Does anybody want any cards to fill out? I'm still a card getter. Also, I want to let you know there's water and it's free and it's out there. I won't have to carry it back to the car.
Use your knife.
Water didn't turn on.
No, it wasn't. Test, test, test. It's on. Maybe it's dead. Let's try the other one.
So there's water and it's out there.
Test, test.
Hey, it's a conspiracy.
Just because they're out to get us doesn't mean.
Oh, there you go.
There we go.
I would like to thank the brave people who testified. Man, that takes some courage, doesn't it? I'd like to thank the Albina Ministerial Alliance Coalition. Well, I've been involved with this, again, doing some work on racial profiling, trying to eliminate that in Portland Police Bureau. Cops that show up to testify are on overtime. These people are here on their own time. It takes a big, long, sustained commitment for social justice. So my name is Dave Hardesty, and I'm a little bit suspicious about talking to a Department of Justice. You know, we live in a time of secret prisons, secret courts. The Attorney General's boss, President Obama, has just approved the killing of American citizens without trial. These are all unconstitutional, but they're going to solve the problems in Portland for us. So I'm trying to remember that when Dr. Princeton University professor Cornel West came to Portland, he said that the civil rights movement kept fascism at bay for 2 generations. That there was no way that the fascists could close down the American government or the American liberties while African Americans were struggling to have the Constitution enforced. And so we owe a debt of gratitude, I think, to those people that Pastor Haynes was talking about that came before us. So for a long time in this conversation, I've been saying that racist police policies are counterproductive. If you want to eliminate the gang problem, you don't want to alienate the people who are going to come to testify. You don't want to alienate the people who are going to give the leads in investigation. And what's going on in Portland is that young men, particularly African American men, are being rousted on a regular basis. They're being thrown up against chain link fences. Cops are running up and putting their hands in their pockets going, "You don't mind if we check you out, do you?" And that's a double negative, right? If you say, "Yeah, I mind," then you say, "Yeah, I'm giving you permission." Anyway, we're alienating a population by practicing police tactics that are race-based. And Keaton Otis knew this. So he's driving down the street. Now these a whole bunch of these guys from the HEAT team, that's the anti-gang team, they're all drinking coffee and probably doing steroids. And they come rolling out of their coffee break, juiced up and ready to go, and they take the first African-American guy that's looking suspicious. And what gets Keaton Otis in trouble is the driver of one of the cars that rolls out of this coffee break sees Keaton looking back in his rearview mirror, scowling. That is not probable cause that a crime has been committed. That is a black man doing something that a white man doesn't want to see. So the policeman that's driving that car spins the computer around and types into there, putting his putting a license tag into it. The other officer sitting in the car goes, "You're going to run that car?" He doesn't see anything that's been, any behavior that's warranted noticing. What happens next is, there's a second car that came rolling out of that coffee break, and they go on their walkie-talkies. "Officer Crow, look into that car over there. Does that look like a 59-year-old female that owns this car?" Officer Crow, or whatever his name is, looks over and he goes, "Nope." What's interesting on the reports, nowhere do they mention that Keaton Otis was black. Isn't that odd? And don't you think that means that the city attorney sat down some time ago with the police department and said, "Please don't tell them that you're pulling over black people, because that would be racist policing." It's the practice, and it got them so scared they forgot to ever write down that they saw that Keaton Otis was black. The powers that be want me to move right along. I just want you to know that the Ku Klux Klan was legal. It used to be part of your police department, and this gang team are white riders riding through your neighborhoods, checking out black people, and if they don't behave, if they don't respond in the way that a white man wants them to, they will be shot or beaten. Okay, I'll tell you why it's important to have an independent attorney with an independent police review board to overlook police behaviors. Because the city attorney is in bed with the cops. He needs the cops in order to prosecute cases. He doesn't ever want to get into a case where he's alienated the people that are on his team in building those cases, right? And so he's not the guy to ask. What will happen is, if you keep it under the city attorney, you will have fake grand juries where they tell you how good the cops are. And in the Keaton Otis case, they had videotape of the shooting. But the grand jury, the convener of the grand jury, asks the woman who shot the tape to leave the room when they're presenting that evidence. That needs investigating. We're going to need to change the state law. There's a standard going on right now that if I shoot you to death as a police officer, the only thing I have to do is stand up and say that I was in fear of my life. And if that's true for me as an individual, you can't bother me. So the change that we need you to get together with the Oregon State Legislature, or perhaps the Department of Justice, to come in and say, justice demands this, is to change the standard to what would a reasonable person believe? What would a reasonable person with an AR-15, much distant from the incident, was he in fear of his life? Can he just tell us that and shoot people? Or does a reasonable person standard have to apply? And Officer Freshour would be held accountable.
Thank you, sir. All very important questions. It's kind of hard to cut your husband off because you actually have to go home with him, so, you know. Shirley's next.
Hello, my name is Shirley Isidore, and a lot of you probably don't know that I am Kendra James's mother. Okay, we don't have the same last name. I don't remember meeting you. I remember meeting you. I have two questions. That night, those two police officers were off duty. Okay? They had prior contact with my child 6 months before that. When she said, "Don't let them hurt me," and what did you do to my child 6 months ago that she's afraid of you? Okay, and that's my only question, is that I'm never going to get what I want from that. You know, they paid this man $25,000 for being off work for 6 months. You know, where's the justice? Is it justice or is it just us? And that's what my t-shirt says. Is it justice or is it just us? Thank you.
Way too many many community members have shared that experience. I want to introduce Ron Silvers, who is also with the Department of Justice, so he's here to listen to the community today as well. Are there people who did not sign up to testify that would like to have information to share? If so, raise your hand. Okay, we got one. Anybody else? Okay, all right. Come on down. And I actually have something to add as well. So I'll take my facilitator hat off in a minute.
I am not a public speaker, so I beg your forgiveness for whatever glitches and mistakes that I make or offenses that I might give. But I had a conversation with my daughter in Houston, Texas, who asked me one day, of all these people being shot and killed in the city of Portland, what percentage are mentally ill? The year was 2010. And I said 100%. And she blew away in Houston, Texas, which is a very crime-ridden place, and where the police are so busy, first of all, with major crime, that they don't really have time to be killing the mentally ill. But I am a teacher. And if any student came to me with a paper with 100% written on it, I would not say, oh, that was an accident. I would say, you intended to get 100%. That's why you got 100%. So I began a research paper and a research project. How did we get to a place that our police force in 2010 only killed mentally ill people? It's a long history. I will not tell you about it. I will say we had better days in the past. We have come upon evil days in the present. That is why we are asking the Department of Justice to help us out. We need help. And the big, huge book that I have made about the history of how we stopped taking care of one another and started shooting each other instead will be turned over to the Department of Justice. I will tell you also that in 1999, this community assembled over 500 community representatives, and we had a vision of who we wanted to be. We created a plan. It's called Future Plan. It exists. You can find it online. But we were going to have community policing, decentralized, people living with one another, the police among us. I'm not sure we want the police among us just yet, but we would like to get back to Future Plan. The only thing I can tell you is that I believe the year 2001 did bring some evil to this nation. And part of our response to evil was fear. And fear grips us. It grips all of us. So what we have to do is overcome that evil, that fear, with what your mama taught you. Love. There is a greater love. And it is already here. It's already among us. So we have the solution here, even as we know we have the problem here. But by the unity, putting the unity back in the community, I think we can solve the problem. We can work together. This is not a matter of black and white, except insofar as it takes black to show white and it takes white to show black. Otherwise, you know, if it's all one color, you see nothing. So we do have to work together, and we will continue to ask the Department of Justice to help us.
Thank you so much. I see a gentleman in the back that would like to speak. Would you come down, sir, and tell me what your name is? And thank you for being here today. I want to also remind people that we are taping this program because our plan is to provide this tape to the Department of Justice. And if you do not want to be taped, please let me know, and we will make sure to respect your wishes.
My name is Joe Bean Keller. As you may have noticed, you saw one of the names up there. My son, Deontay J. Keller, was shot back by Portland Police Officer Terry Kruger in February 28th. It'll be 16 years on the 20th of this month. And he was shot in the back as he left out of the car in which was pulled over, in which they said that he had brandished a gun. But realistically, what it was that he had a 10th of a gram of cocaine that was in his underwear and no driver's license, and he was trying to get away. And basically, at that time, he was shot in the back before he got 70 feet away, basically. And then he was found approximately 2 houses down as he had went around the corner and passed out in the back of the house. He was handcuffed, left to die, basically, for over 2.5 hours. Medical was called for him because they were only like 4 minutes away, because this happened off of Interstate and Shaver Street, and the medical was right at the fire station on Interstate going. And so once they got there, they did not allow the medical to get to him. So to me, a dead witness is the best witness in a situation of his magnitude right there. And even though there were people that were in the car with him that were taken, it was I have a website out. If you go to PPB Complaint, it's actually www.ppb-complaint.com. And you can go to the untold story of Deontay J. Keller, and that kind of gives you the scenario. And this is all their evidence in which was compiled, that I compiled together and put back into a format, in which is a blueprint, basically, of police injustice. And in that, you will find that out of the people that were in the car, there's a lot of evidence that people didn't really realize, is that the gentleman, one of the gentlemen, he was told once he got into the police car that he was a part of a murder that had supposed to have taken place, but there was never any murder that actually took place. And so once they got down to the police station, these people were assuming that there was a murder that they was a part of. And so basically, they controlled their conversations from that right there. And in the end, after 3 years of going through this process, and a multi-million-dollar lawsuit that was pending, 3 months before it was time to go to trial, Judge Janice Stewart, yes, Judge Janice Stewart, dismissed my attorney, and the city of Portland paid him off, basically. They knew that I would not have enough time to get another attorney to review this whole case itself. But if you go to, like I said, go to the website to find information, and it's a blueprint for injustice, and it's going to continue on. But as I look at things, it's like this right here. We deal with the police department and so forth, but realistically, we have to understand that the insurance companies are the ones that pay the money. And so there are agents in the insurance company that have more power than a lot of other people in the city of Portland, the police department, and in the government itself, because they're the ones that hold the purse strings, and if they don't release them, there's going to be, that's where it all comes from. So we have to really start really looking at the real problem itself. And don't get too focused on, some of the things, the end of things that we see, because it's the things that we don't see that can blind us. And like I say, murder, I feel my son was murdered, and there's no time lapse on statute of limitations on murder, so I'm not done yet.
Thank you. There's a young lady who just told me that she wants to testify. Do you want to get all set up before you do that? Okay, I got stuff, I can talk. There's a gentleman up here that would like to testify. Please come on down, sir, and tell me your name once you get down. Thank you for being here. What's your name?
My name is Aaron Coulter.
Nice to meet you, Aaron.
I'm relatively new to Portland. I moved out here from Northwest Indiana and Chicago, so police brutality is not something I'm unfamiliar with, though I thought it would be different here in Portland. Certainly, the incident I'm going to speak at from Monday night is not even close to what many in this room have gone through, but I think it's a disturbing trend of what we may see in 2012 in the Portland Police Department. For many of you know, there was an anti-police brutality march in Southeast Portland on Monday night. I had heard that some windows were being smashed. As a member of that community, I wanted to go out and make sure that the businesses and homes where my friends and I work were safe. When I got to Hawthorne and 20th, there was a march of about 40 people crossing the intersection. Out of nowhere, 5 horse-mounted police, a dozen bicycle police, a van of riot cops, 2 undercover police cars, and 5 squad cars stormed the intersection. A lot of these kids that were out there, I don't know if they had been trained in nonviolence. I don't think they knew what they were doing until they took off into the very nice Lads Edition housing department. I personally saw, gentlemen from the Department of Justice, I saw police chase these kids down and beat them. They beat them with clubs. They beat them with their hands. They then circled the bikes and the horse-mounted police around the kids that they were arresting so that we couldn't take pictures to see what was happening. One young gentleman was crying out that he had a mental disorder. We could hear him being beat. We could see him being beat with batons. Police, as someone else mentioned, corralled a lot of these protesters. The march continued up the street, Hawthorne. A few members, for those of you that don't know, there's a Safeway being built on Hawthorne. One side of the street has no sidewalk because of this. So as the protesters got to this part of the street, they attempted to cross the other side of the street. Again, several horse-mounted police, riot cops, bicycle police did as she said. They grabbed random people. They weren't grabbing people who were breaking the law. They were just grabbing people who were in front of them. I don't know what happened to a lot of these people after they were taken away. All I can say is that night I wasn't afraid of some kids dressed in black. I was afraid of the police department in my own neighborhood. And I think from what I saw that they don't feel that they have to be accountable to anyone. And I'm afraid that they're going to do something worse this year, whether it's at an Occupy event, whether it's pulling someone over. The police that I saw there were mocking people, and it was just clear that they felt that they were accountable to no one. So that's why I'm here today. Thank you.
So I want to check and see if there's anyone else who would like to provide testimony that hasn't spoken yet. If there's time at the end, I'll get back to you, right?
Hi, my name is Reverend Kate Lohr, and I am a minister at First Unitarian Church, where we host a shelter for homeless families. And what I want to get on record is something that I'm hearing time and time again from our folks on the street who are homeless. And that is that there has been systematic sorting of homeless persons by the Portland police. They are going places where people camp when they don't have a house, and they are asking specifically, are you part of Occupy Portland? If they are part of Occupy Portland, they are taken in and their things are thrown away and they're roughed up. If people say they are not part of Occupy Portland, they get to remain and their belongings are left undisturbed. And I find this terribly troubling, and I want to be part of the public record on that.
Thank you so much, Kate. So I have 2 things to share. One is my personal observation on January 25th, being downtown, actually leaving your church, Kate, because we understood that the police were going to come and try to remove folks from the park blocks. And so as good community members, we went down. We wanted to bear witness to what would take place. We wanted to ensure that young people were going to be safe if the police showed up in force. I was actually standing across the street from the park blocks where the camp was set up, and I was playing on my cell phone, and I looked up and I was surrounded by men dressed from head to toe in black helmets, black gear, black shoes, and they all had, they were all in riot gear. And I looked up and I was like, wow, where did they come from? It's like almost instantly they showed up. And so because I was on the side of the street where they were going to be pushing people, I actually ended up being in the front line of where the police met the campers. And what happened was pretty appalling to me. So I'm standing there and we're waiting to get instructions, and we see that police just keep coming and coming and coming and coming, and there are hundreds of police officers in this riot gear. And then they start taking their batons. They don't say a word. They start taking their batons and they start pushing us. And they start pushing us back down the street. And it's like, well, wait a minute. There's no way that I can move if the person behind me hasn't moved yet, and if the person behind them hasn't moved yet. Luckily, I am pretty much well known in this community, and one of the officers went, "Miss Bowman, we don't want any trouble, we don't want any trouble." And he said to the other young officer, "If she's doing what you told her to do, don't push her." Now, I shouldn't have special treatment by Portland Police. Anybody that's on the sidewalk who is actually following orders should expect that they're not going to be abused by people who are sworn to protect and serve. So that's my Occupy story. Now I'm going to tell you what I do in my other volunteer hat. I currently serve on the City of Portland's Charter Review Commission. And for those of you who don't know, the City of Portland's Constitution has the opportunity to be reviewed once every 10 years. Well, I'm part of the group of people who are now looking at our Constitution, and there are several proposals around police accountability that will be going out for public hearings. So you may have seen on the slide February 13th and February 22nd, there will be two proposals. One would ban the use of tear gas or any chemical element in a crowd control situation. The second would prohibit the use of animals in crowd control situations. The reason those two proposals have moved forward through the charter review process is quite simple. These are very, very simple policy changes that if we had political will in this community, if we had a police commissioner that was responsive to the public, if we had a police chief who was responsive to the public, these two simple policy changes could be implemented today. But because we don't, we are forced to go to the charter, our Constitution, and ask the voters if we can ban the use of animals and chemical agents. Now, why are we asking for the ban of these two items? It's really simple. What we know is that the chemical agents that Portland Police use now are 4 times or more stronger than the ones that they used just last year. What we know is now they come to peaceful protest marches with huge canisters of chemical spray. We don't know yet what the health implications are for inhaling these chemicals. We don't know what the long-term health impacts will be. As far as the animals are concerned, horses are not animals that operate well in crowded situations. Animals could trample people, and quite frankly, the animals can be hurt if you are in a crowded situation. And so because of those issues, we're going to have a vote of the Charter Commission. If 15 members of the Charter Commission vote in the affirmative, those two measures would go directly to voters at the November 2012 election. If 11 to 14 of those members vote for it, then it goes to the City Council, which gives them the option of whether to send it directly to the voters. It is my goal to get 15 charter commission members to vote in the affirmative so that we, the people, will have the opportunity to vote on these measures. Now, I will be the first one to tell you the Constitution is not the place for these issues, but if that's the only mechanism that the public has available to them, then I say we need to use it. Thank you. So are you ready to provide some testimony now? Come on up, tell us who you are, and I'll give you the mic.
Hello everyone, my name is Lisa Haynes, and I thank you all for coming, and I'm glad that Ms. Joy put this on for us today, because we are the voice, we are the people who's going to make a change and make a difference in what's going on in the world today. I'll be brief and try to make it short. My son, Felix Bordeaux, I found him after 20 plus years. I moved down here to Portland about 3 years ago from Tucson, Arizona. And our first incident with the police department was in Arizona. We were on the bus, and you know it's the Wild Wild West out there in Arizona. So you're legal to carry weapons and all of that out in the open. My son is a martial arts, black belt in martial arts. And he had his police baton, he had his handcuffs, and a star, you know, a knife. There's 3 blades on it, and he had it out in the open. Well, there were some Hispanic people on the bus that caused some confrontation with him, staring at him, kept looking at him, and, you know, just eyeballing him, you know. And my son approached him, you know, and said, "Why do you keep staring at me? You know, do you know me?" You know, things like that. So there was another gentleman that got on the bus, and he was Hispanic also. And he was sitting by the gentleman that was staring at my son. We were up on top of the bus, and you have to walk the step, you know, walk on the steps to sit up in the back. And we were in the back, and they were down below. And they looked all the way up there at my son and I, you know, staring. And so it wasn't a really big deal. They squashed it and everything. So the bus driver felt that he had to call the cops. You know, after it was squashed, you know, my son and them squashed it, apologized. And there was 2 young white teenage kids on the bus who called the cops also. So they stopped the bus, and we got off the bus because we were going to catch the next one. And we stood right there, and the 2 teenagers got on their knees like we were going to assassinate them or something. You know, call the cops on us. We were right there, and the bus could see everything. There was helicopters coming. There was cops coming from everywhere on me and my son. We got off the bus because we didn't want to have confrontation with the cops. We hate cops, you know, because we know what they're known for. So they came with my son. He was walking away from them when they came. And they just dogpiled him, but they didn't hurt him. They knew how to take him down, you know, without tasing him, without shooting him. That's the difference between them and the police out here in Portland, Oregon. You know, he didn't get injured. Plus, he was already injured in 2 car accidents. He has a bulging disc. And so the second incident happened last year. Well, 2 incidents happened last year by the hands of Portland police. My son was walking from the Dollar Tree on 102nd and Washington, and I guess the incident happened where a black man and a white Caucasian woman was walking together. They had stabbed someone on 102nd. Sergeant may have heard about that. Well, they saw my son, thought he was convenient, you know. So the white female officer that spotted him stopped and told him to pull over and pull your gun out on him. And he kept walking because they just donated plasma to help pay the bills, you know, and buy household products from Dollar Tree. And so he walked to safety where the people knew him at the plasma center. And the police came in there and attacked my son, and they tore his rotator cuff. And Greg Furry is his attorney. And so the second incident happened to both of us just last year, November the 19th. I was coming from the Gun Expo, and I purchased a weapon, a 9mm Ruger with hollow points, okay, and a stun gun and a holster. So we were headed home. My gun was registered there. I'm not a felon, I don't have a record. I'm legal to have it. The only thing that they didn't tell me that I didn't know was that I was carrying a concealed weapon. I didn't have a permit, but I was in the process of getting it because I already took the gun class, you know. So, I have like beliefs, spiritual beliefs, you know. A Native person blessed me with a necklace because I fed them at a hospital behind what the police did to my son at the ER, and it broke on me at the expo. And I just felt it was like kind of like bad luck, a bad omen or something. The necklace broke. So we were headed home, and we had to transfer to Rose Quarter, and we got on the max. And I had a funny feeling. I said I didn't want to get at the end. I didn't want to get on the end of the max because it was really not that crowded. But I just had a feeling that I didn't want to be on there for some reason. I wanted to be on the one that was really crowded. You know, there was a drunk couple on the max, and he kept falling into me. Didn't say sorry or anything. You know, my son engaged him in a conversation. He said, "That's my mother you keep backing into and falling into. You're going to hurt her and hurt someone else." Okay? So he just kept doing it and just harassing people all over the max. And he said, "That might be your mother. That might be your mother. That's not your mother. That's not your mother." So he just kept going on and in my son's face, in his space. You know, and I feel when you're in someone's space this close, that you're trying to do bodily harm. Even when you touch them, that's an assault. And that's exactly what he did. My son said, "You need to move away. My hands are lethal weapon, you know, trained to kill." And he even warned me. God didn't listen. He was all, had his hands out, you know, like he wasn't doing anything wrong, you know, like he's an innocent one, you know. And so we get off the max. It got squashed. It was without incident or anything. The witnesses called the cops on us. Called the cops on us because we were the only black people on the bus at the time. I mean, on the max, excuse me, on the max. And they were pushing the button. Everybody walked by and was pushing the button. You can clearly see that they was trying to control him. He was even holding a woman. It looks like he knew her, but he was holding her hostage on the max. She slapped him. He slapped her. He was just harassing folks on the bus. People was telling me I need to get a handle on my son when all he did was pick the guy up and put him at the exit so he could get off. That's all he did without incident. We get the cops called on us at the Lloyd Center, Hollywood Park. The only thing, they got away. They got away. We walked like we were going to the mall up under the parking garage because we knew that they were going to come after us, being this skin color, okay? The witnesses lied, said they must have tried to start a fight. Okay, the cops come. I stand in front of the son like this, you know, because I didn't want my son to be another statistic. I found him after 20 years and I didn't want to lose him, you know. And we're activists out here in Portland, Oregon, we're activists. And I volunteer for ERCO. I've been a nurse for 20 years, you know. And I will protect my son because he didn't do anything wrong. He was only protecting his mama. Okay? So they tased my son. They wanted me, they didn't want me, they wanted my son because of his build and for what the witnesses said. Okay? So they tased my son. They pulled me away from my son, dragged me on the ground, and forced me to the ground and put me in handcuffs and tased me in front of my son. So I was yelling and screaming to the witness to record and to write it down, but nobody would do that. I said, record us, videotape us, whatever you gotta do. They're trying to kill us, you know. They didn't try to talk to us. I was trying to talk to them so I could find out if our rights were being violated. They violated us. So I go to court. This past week, I went to court I had an unrepresentable attorney, public defender. I fired him, and the court system wouldn't let me fire him because he was. I have to say this: my son is a boss. He's done time in prison, but it was for criminal mistreatment. That's the only record he's ever had, and you know how the law is with that. You know, he can't be around no guns, and I knew this. You know, there's no law that says he can't come with me to the gun show. You know, he didn't touch any guns. You know, so I was the one that wanted the gun to protect my family. You know, if you look at all that's going on around in the news today in the world, you know, it's just me and him. I have no family members out here. The community is my family. So I go to court. I ask the judge, she's a female judge, to submit my receipt. To submit my card showing that I did take my gun class and that I was buying the weapon, not for my son. They tried to coerce us and pin it on my son. He would have got like 3 counts of, he would have been like in prison for life. They wanted my son so bad, behind nothing, behind what people were saying on the maps. They lied on us.
And so what was the result?
So the result of the thing, the result of the court case, I fought my case by myself. And I ended up getting, because of what I told the judge, I ended up getting a plea bargain and no record. I only got like interference with a police officer. That's like a traffic violation. And I beat my own case with 3 judges. I did.
I think this is a lesson for us all, right? Is definitely you have to fight. The thing that breaks my heart about your story was that we know that community witnesses are key. And we know that when people stop and take their cell phones and take pictures and take notes and pay attention and actually call and report abuse, then it creates a record. And we find ourselves in a catch-22 situation, right? Because people don't want to file complaints because they don't believe they will be investigated. But if you don't file complaints, then we don't have the historical record to say this is truly getting worse and worse and worse. And I actually believe it is getting worse and worse and worse in this community because the police know today how easy it is to get away with abusing community members. They know. Now there's a thing that Portland police officers do that's called a walk and talk. We know that the police keep data on traffic and pedestrian stops. So if you're walking, if you're on a bicycle, if you're in a car, we know that Portland Police Department collects that data annually and annually makes it available to the public. And consistently, every time the data is released, we know that if you're African American, you're 3 times more likely to be stopped by Portland police. We know that if you're Latino, you're 1.7 times more likely to be stopped and searched by Portland police. We also know that if you're white, and if you just happen to be stopped by Portland police, you're more likely to have weapons, drugs, and other paraphernalia in your possession. And so let me talk a little bit about the walk and talk. The walk and talk is just a maneuver that's not recorded anywhere. It happens to kids between 14 and 24 years old in our community. And it happens like this. Would you come up and stand here with me, please? I'm going to pretend to be a Portland police officer. This nice lady is just pretend that she's a kid between 14 and 24 years old in our neighborhood. And so as the police officer, I will walk up and say, hi, how you doing today? Is it okay if I search you? What's in your backpack? Where are you going in this neighborhood? Do you live here? Hello? Can I have the backpack? Do you have ID? And so as a kid, imagine that. You're 14 to 24 years old, and somebody that's loaded down with weapons come and ask you, at the same time they have placed their hands into your pockets. At the same time, they're already checking your backpack. This is the reality that our kids live each and every day in the city of Portland. The most egregious part of this is that this isn't recorded anywhere. Because if you ask Portland police officers about this practice of walk and talk, they will tell you that that's good community policing. They're doing community policing. This is not.
Actually, it is recorded because I witness it on a monthly basis, this type of behavior in public, and I don't record it anywhere, but it's recorded.
Well, but my point is that there's nowhere that Portland police officers are required to write down the number of people in our community that they truly stop and they truly search. Because if all that information was written down, we would all be appalled at how many kids have to prove that they are worthy to walk in their own neighborhood, to go to their own faith-based organizations, to just be kids in the neighborhood. And it's absolutely unexcusable. And I stopped kids and said, why did that officer stop you? Why was he searching you? Oh, they said somebody that looked like me had a gun in their backpack, so they were just checking. When I say to kids, you have a constitutional right to say no, they say it is easier to just say yes, because otherwise the harassment increases. If you say no, then you become a target for police behavior. That's not why we fought the civil rights movement. That's not why we want police in our community. If they are public servants, they're supposed to work with us, not against us. And so I want to stop and see if there's anyone else that wants to provide testimony. Come on down. I haven't forgotten Ron's. I'm coming back.
Hi, give us your name, please.
Hi, my name's Monica. I'm part of Occupy. I guess the main thing I want to say right now, I mean, I've been witness to a lot of police violence, and I also would like to put on the record that at 32 years old, the first time a man ever aggressively touched me and harassed me and pushed me was by a police officer for walking on the sidewalk, which I feel fortunate, you know, that I've never been a victim of domestic violence, and I think that's really sad that happened in that manner. But the main point I want to put across is that over the last couple of marches, I've seen the escalation in violence by police, and at this point I'm fearing that the Occupy people are going to start being victims of police shootings, because the violence has escalated so much and so rapidly that I'm kind of wondering what's going to happen in our march tomorrow. We have a permit, so hopefully we won't get harassed too much, but we'll see how that goes. So that's pretty much all I have to say.
Thank you, Monica. I would be remiss if I didn't take a moment to point out Jim Parks, who is an instructor here at PCC Cascade. He is a phenomenal man who worked his off to make sure that we had this space today. So I just want to publicly say thank you so much, Jim Parks. We could not have done this without you today, so thank you. And I see one of the community sisters coming down, and I had hoped that Joyce would be able to kind of talk to us a bit about the history of police violence in this community. Joyce is one of my sheroes who actually has been in this struggle with us since Kendra James' days. So we've been around, we've been actually talking about these issues for quite some time, and actually really trying to push both police commissioners and police chiefs. And I want to say that it really doesn't matter at this point who the police commissioner or who the police chief is in the city of Portland, because if you've been following the slideshow, you know that we've been through about 6 police chiefs, we've been through about 5 mayors, and we still have an unresponsive police department, and we have a police commissioner that does not answer to the community. And so you can change the faces, but the reality remains the same. Welcome, Ms. Joyce Harris. How are you today? I would wouldn't do this to just anybody, Joyce, but you know, for you, I know I can put you on the spot and you would be able to rise to the occasion. So as you know what we're doing here today. And I just wanted you to share some thoughts about the history of this issue in this community. Thank you.
Okay, well, first I want to apologize. This is my third meeting of the day, and every last one of them has run at least a half hour over. So, and then I got stuck behind a car accident on I-5. But as Joanne has said, this history, and we've got to understand that when you begin to look at injustices and disparities, you can't just look at the moment. You have to look at what has been the historical continuum. So I can go back to in the late 70s, when this community was being victimized once again by the brutality that some of the people who are paid to protect us were exhibiting. And I recall very vividly that within a 2-year period, there were 6 African American men who were killed at the hands of police. I can't even think, the names every time I think about, there was a Menifee who was killed on Williams Avenue and Russell Street as a result of a police chase from Southeast Portland. Remember that? Some of you remember that? Ricky Johnson, a 16-year-old. That was an interesting case because these young men had been, and nobody disputes the fact that they might have been involved in robbing, pizza delivery people. But the tragic thing about it was and I went to the inquest. I knew the family. Actually, I found out about Ricky's death because I was teaching his 5-year-old nephew. And we would do a little circle on Monday morning. And what did you do over the weekend? And this little fellow, as a matter of fact, he said, my uncle got killed. He shot him in the back of the head. And what happened was they were trying to rob a pizza delivery, or actually it was a Chinese delivery. And the police rendezvous with radio cab. Till this day, you could not pay for me to ride in radio cab, because they actually rendezvoused with the police, and the police actually put on the cab driver's jacket, went to the door with the food box, and had a gun. And when this young man, Ricky Johnson, came to the door with the intent, we assume, to rob him, the police dropped the box, he turned to run, bullet caught him square in the back of the head. And there were some questions because mysteriously a gun appeared. And as we found out later, there was another young man who was actually in that apartment. It was a house. And he hid in the closet. And for weeks, this young man was terrified. And this was kind of like the final straw for the community. So we formed a committee called the Black Justice Committee. And we met for months. We requested a federal investigation because like in a 2-year period of time, 6 black men had been killed at the hands of the police under questionable circumstances. And the young man who hid in the closet, he was lucky in that at some point he did run out, and one of the police officers had him in the middle of the street, and there was a woman in the community who lived right next to that house. And it was like 2 o'clock in the morning, and the police actually had this young man face down on the pavement. And all of this came out in the inquest, so Joyce Harris isn't making anything up. Had the gun cocked to his head and told him if you move, what he was going to do, he was going to shoot him. And her name was Miss Thrower. She screamed out, "Don't you do it, don't you do it." And that, to this day, we believe that that's the only thing that saved this young man's life. So there has been a history. And I think the part of it that gets very frustrating is that we get the same response. It was justified. At some point, someone has got to say, no, this was not justified. You know, how do you justify shooting someone in the back? You know, and I think what's most disturbing for many of us, and particularly when we look at the Aaron Campbell killing, and the killing of Keaton Otis, and I see Keaton's dad here, it doesn't make sense. No matter how you look at it, it doesn't make sense. And, you know, we were being told, well, you know, you've never been in a situation, you have to react. But, you know, we've got common sense, so we know. And we've had examples. The gentleman up in Washington, someone tried to rob him, and he used, I think, was it rubber bullets or something? You know, so there are examples of being able to handle situations where death doesn't have to be the outcome. I think that's the message. Why does death have to be the outcome? Let me just call something to your attention. This morning I happened to be reading the Oregonian, and there's that community living section or something, and they have a big front page story of Hollis Watkins, who was right here on this campus Monday night. One of the original young men who sat to desegregate the lunch counters, civil rights icon. And what was really interesting in his story as he told about his experience being jailed in Mississippi was that one of the things that the jailers, one of the games they would play is they would tell the incarcerated civil rights writers to run outside, to go outside, it was okay. But then they would have two people waiting outside with guns to shoot them. And I thought to myself, wow. Aaron Campbell was coaxed out, and he thought he was safe. Yeah, read that piece. But, you know, as Jordan was saying, what we really need to be aware of is that this didn't just start happening, and there's a disconnect between the leadership and the rank and the file. Now think about it. If you are the leader of an organization, people that work for you are supposed to follow the policies and procedures that you say are in effect. And here we have clearly seen that the leadership of the police bureau is saying one thing, but operationally other things are happening. And that's what we have to address. And that's what I think many of you are in this room for. We've got to speak up, we've got to speak out, and we've got to continue to press this issue, or we will continue to have people being shot in the circumstances where it was justified. It's just not acceptable. So, thank you for putting me on the spot.
You do well for someone put on the spot. So I have two other stories that I want to share to make sure are part of the record. You may remember the story about Senator Abel Gordley, who has a son who has mental health issues. And at the time that there was an encounter between her son and Portland police, we were fortunate for several reasons. We were fortunate because there was a relationship between the police chief and the African American community. The police chief was Dirk Foxworth at the time. We were fortunate because Dirk Foxworth actually knew the young man who was suffering a mental health crisis. We were fortunate because Senator Abel Gordley called Chief Dirk Foxworth and asked him to come to the scene. Even with all that, an officer shot at Senator Abel Gordley's son. Thankfully, he missed. So even with the police chief at the scene saying, do not shoot, an officer did. That officer still works for Portland Police Bureau. I also want to remind you that less than 6 months ago, there was a front page story about an African American woman and her husband who separately called Portland police because they had an 18-year-old son suffering a mental health crisis. They both, on separate phones, called Portland police, and their message was, "My son is suffering a mental health crisis. Please don't kill my son." Mom called and Dad called on a separate number with the exact same message. Fortunately, the police officers who showed up actually allowed the dad to talk to his son, and the son went to a hospital where he needed to go. Now, just as Joyce said, we have models for how you do that. Hillsborough Police Department was able to take a man who was a Vietnam vet, who was suffering from PTSD, who had made bombs that he was throwing at the police officers who showed up. They were able to take that man to a mental health facility where he could get treatment. And so I ask you, as I asked the Department of Justice, why can't we do that in the city of Portland? Why is the rule that you shoot to kill and then you figure out what was going on with the individual? I also want you to know how dangerous it is for community members to stand up to the police. We've had experiences with ministers, with grassroots leaders who ask questions and challenge police brutality, and then they show up mysteriously in the newspaper. We suddenly find out that their kids are in trouble with the law, or we find out that way back when there was a charge against them. It appears that the practices of Portland police requires that when your statement doesn't agree with what their theory of what happened is, you don't actually get invited to the grand jury. Or if you do, they make sure that they put 4 people on ahead of you to tell you, to say that you couldn't have seen what you saw. So if they actually call you, they're making sure that your testimony is disregarded. So we're going to close up early because I don't think you guys will be too mad with me if you end early on a Saturday afternoon and you get to go back out into the world. So there are a few things I want to share with you before we leave. There's a young woman back here, wave your hand, that has these Know Your Rights pamphlets. She's a student with Lewis and Clark College, but they've done some fabulous work with the National Lawyers Guild and Portland Cop Watch and others to make sure that community members know their rights when they're interacting with the police. She will be outside the door with these pamphlets available when we end. I also wanted to make sure that everybody has the dates for all the upcoming meetings that are taking place. So let's go through them in order. So I think the first one coming up will be the Charter Review meeting on February 15th, which will be a public hearing at Midland Library to take information on those 2 charter measures that I talked about. After that one, there will be one on the 22nd. The 27th will be a full commission meeting. The 28th will be the Department of Justice meeting at St. John's in North Portland. On March 1st, the AMA Coalition will be hosting a candidates forum. We will be asking people who may want to be police commissioner and who will be on the city council about what they believe needs to happen with Portland Police Department. Let's see, that was March 1st. On March 9th is the next AMA Coalition meeting that will happen at Dr. Leroy Haynes Church. Oh, Maranatha? Oh, my bad. I think I have it wrong up there then. And Maranatha's address is 4222 12th Avenue in Northeast Portland. And the U.S. Department of Justice will take information anytime, especially people with very specific information. You can do it over the web, you can do it via phone call, you can do it in person when they come to town on the 28th. But it's important that they hear these stories, because it is my belief when they were here in August, they didn't hear from a lot of people. They heard from a few people. So hopefully when they're back in town, and today, and when they're back, we will have additional information, they will be able to gather additional information. So our next steps from this is we're going to make a copy of the presentation today. We're going to present that to the Department of Justice. Not sure if we're giving it to the local folks or the folks in DC, but we'll figure that out. And then we will continue our work to make sure that we are making policy changes, that we're electing people that actually understand that this is a community effort. Community policing requires, guess what? The community to be involved in it. Oh yeah, I started at February 15th. I started at February 15th and moved out. No, I didn't. Oh, yes I did, because that one, yeah. Because this is what we have now, the Community and Police Relations Committee. I don't even, it doesn't register with me. That may very well be. If there are no other testimony, no additional information, I'd like to give the U.S. Department of Justice actually an opportunity to say a couple of words before we.
I just want to say, don't be a bystander. If you see things happening, stop. Take information. Get people's names, because that's often what's missing. There's just two sides of the story, the person who's dead and the person who killed him. So don't be a bystander.
Well, I mean, one of the challenges that we actually have, quite frankly, is especially when the police show up in riot gear, they are required by general order to have a name tag that's clearly displayed. We know that police go out of their way to hide that information. And so, I bet you're Amanda, aren't you? Busted. And so I'm going to give you an opportunity in just a minute. I will introduce you. Timing's impeccable. It's just about to occur. I do. They get no additional time at all. So I'm going to stop here. I'm going to come back and wrap up, but I want to make sure that the U.S. Department of Justice, and I want to introduce you to Amanda Marshall, who is the new U.S. Attorney for Oregon. Welcome.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I just want to apologize for not being here from the beginning. I was here at about 11:45, but I think we had a mix-up with the rooms, and I drove over from McMinnville, where I live today. But I got the message from Billy and was able to turn around and drive back. So I guess better late than never. And I was really important to me that I was able to be here today. It's a great opportunity for me to reach out and let you know how much I care about this issue and how dedicated my office is in working with the community and the police and all of our partners that are all dedicated to public safety and the safety of our neighborhoods, but also and equally to civil rights and to making sure that as we do our job to keep the community safe, that we do it in a way that's respectful and empowering for all members of the community. So I appreciate the opportunity to let you know that, and I want you to know that even though I haven't been here to listen in person as I really wanted to do today, to all of the thoughts and concerns that have been expressed, that I see that Billy has his notepad out, and I know that he's an excellent scribe, and Ron as well. So you've got my civil chief and my criminal chief here, and I plan to be completely briefed and updated on everyone's concerns. And I know we have another meeting coming up at the end of the month, which will include representatives from the Civil Rights Division of the United States Department of Justice that are flying out from Washington, D.C. as a part of the ongoing investigation and the work that they're doing in Oregon. And I plan to be at that meeting as well, so we'll continue the conversation. And I just really appreciate you all showing up today.
Well, thank you so much. And I certainly want to let you know that the AMA Coalition for Justice and Police Reform looks forward to meeting with you and working with you, because I believe we have a shared common agenda, which is to make sure that justice is not just a word, but it's a reality for the people who live here in the city of Portland. So thank you for being here. And so we're gonna wrap it up, actually, because we've been here for 2.5 hours. You guys have been great. Thank you so much for coming. You have all the information about the next steps to get involved. Feel free to contact us. Keep your eyes open, keep your ears open, and as always, also, freeze. Stop for just a moment, please.
On behalf of the Albina Ministerial Coalition for Justice and Police Reform, we want to thank you for taking out time to come out today and sharing your testimony and just making this a consistent reality of pushing the envelope that we can achieve the kind of diverse community and community of justice that will benefit the total community in this city, because we cannot deal with the issues of crime and the issues of gang violence and the issue of domestic violence without having trust in our police department. And when we have trust, in our police department, people will come up and say, I saw that. And they will come up and pinpoint things. They will organize, and they will say that we're partners together in making this a better community. And so this is what we're driving for. Thank you very much.
That's a wrap. Thank you so much for coming. We appreciate it.